Everything you have ever bought was made possible by one thing. Not money, not labor, not technology. Energy. Every dollar in your pocket, every job on your street, every product on every shelf. It all traces back to a single source. The power to do work. And here's the part that nobody teaches you in school. Economic growth, the thing governments promise every election cycle, is not driven by policy. It is not driven by innovation alone. It is not even driven by the stock market. It is driven by energy. And the moment a society runs short of it, the entire economic machine begins to break. Think about the last time gas prices jumped. Maybe it was a few years ago, when the average American was paying over $5 a gallon for the first time in history. You pulled up to the pump and did the math in your head. And something felt wrong. It wasn't just the gas. Your grocery bill went up that same month. The delivery fee on your food order increased. Your airline ticket cost twice what it did the year before. The small business you loved raised its prices. You started cutting things out of your life, not because you chose to, but because you had to. And what frustrated you most was that no one seemed to be able to explain it. Politicians blamed corporations. Corporations blamed supply chains. Supply chains blamed the weather. But none of them told you the real reason. The real reason was that the energy supply had tightened. And when that happens, everything else gets more expensive. Everything. Here is something that sounds simple, but changes everything once you really understand it. The economy is not a financial system. It is a physical system. Money is a tool for tracking value. But value itself comes from the ability to transform raw materials into something useful. And transformation requires energy. You need energy to grow food, to move goods, to heat homes, to manufacture products, to power hospitals, to run the internet. Without energy, none of it happens. This means that every major economic expansion in history has been preceded by an expansion in energy access. And every major economic crisis has had an energy disruption somewhere near its roots. The question isn't whether energy drives the economy. The question is, why doesn't anyone talk about it? To understand what this looks like in real life, look at Ethan. Ethan is 34 years old. He lives in Houston, Texas. He works as a logistics coordinator for a regional trucking company. Ethan's job is to move goods, from warehouses to stores, from factories to distribution centers. He is good at his job. He works hard. He earns a decent wage. But Ethan has noticed something over the past few years. His real wage, what his money actually buys, keeps shrinking. Not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily, consistently, year after year. His rent has gone up. His groceries have gone up. His car insurance has gone up. His paycheck has technically gone up too, but never quite fast enough to keep pace. Ethan blames his employer. He blames the government. He blames inflation. But what Ethan doesn't realize is that the industry he works in, trucking, runs entirely on diesel. And diesel is a form of energy. When diesel prices rise, the cost of moving every single product in the country rises with it. That cost gets passed to retailers. Retailers pass it to consumers. Consumers pay more for everything. Ethan is not just a victim of energy prices. He is embedded in a supply chain that transmits energy costs to every corner of the American economy. Here is the first hidden rule. Energy costs don't just affect energy bills. They set a floor on the price of everything. Think about what it takes to produce a loaf of bread. Farmers use fuel to run tractors. Manufacturers use electricity to run mills. Trucks burn diesel to deliver flour to bakeries. Bakeries use gas or electricity to run their ovens. Every single step requires energy. And when the cost of that energy rises, every single step gets more expensive. This is why economists call energy a cost-push force on inflation. It doesn't just raise prices in one industry. It raises prices across the entire economy simultaneously. And here is what makes it so invisible. Most people experience it as inflation, a general sense that things cost more. They blame corporate greed. They blame government spending. They blame the Federal Reserve. None of those explanations are entirely wrong, but they are all downstream of something more fundamental. The energy cost embedded in every product, every service, every transaction in the economy. In 1973, OPEC, the coalition of oil-producing nations, cut off oil exports to the United States. Within months, the American economy experienced something it had never fully seen before. Inflation spiked. Lines formed at gas stations. Factories slowed production. The GDP of the United States actually contracted, not because of a financial crisis, not because of a bank failure, because energy suddenly cost more. Americans who had grown up in the post-war boom, an era of cheap oil, cheap goods, and expanding wages, suddenly discovered that their prosperity had an invisible foundation. And that foundation could be shaken by events occurring thousands of miles away. The 1973 oil embargo is still studied in economics classrooms today, but even there, it is often framed as a geopolitical event, not as what it actually was. A demonstration that energy is the foundation every other economic activity is built upon. But here is where it gets even more interesting. The relationship between energy and economic growth is not just directional, it is almost mathematical. In the 1980s, a physicist named Charles Hall began studying what he called EROI, Energy Return on Investment. The basic idea is this: it takes energy to get energy. A century ago, when the great Texas oil fields were first tapped, a single barrel of oil burned in extraction could yield 100 barrels of usable oil. The EROI was 100 to 1. That extraordinary ratio is a large part of why the 20th century produced the most explosive economic growth in human history. Cheap, abundant energy created cheap, abundant production. And cheap, abundant production created the modern middle class. Today, the average EROI for global oil extraction has fallen sharply. Some estimates put it as low as 15 to 1 for conventional oil, and even lower for certain unconventional sources like tar sands. That means the economic system is working harder and spending more to get the same energy it once got almost for free. Ethan feels this in his daily life, but he doesn't have a name for it. His company's fuel costs have steadily risen over the past decade, even in years when oil prices seemed stable. The trucks need to drive further. The extraction is more expensive. The logistics are more complex. The hidden rule is this: as energy gets harder to extract, the economy must work harder just to stay in the same place. Economists call this a productivity headwind. Most people call it, why does everything feel so much harder than it used to? Now let's look at the full picture. Energy powers production. Production creates goods and services. Goods and services are measured as GDP. GDP growth is what governments and economists call a healthy economy. But GDP growth is only possible if the underlying energy supply can support it. This is why, when you chart global energy consumption against global GDP over the past century, the two lines move almost in lockstep. Not perfectly. Technology has helped us squeeze more output from the same unit of energy, but the correlation is impossible to ignore. More energy, more growth. Less energy, less growth. Energy shock, recession. Look at the recessions of 1973, 1979, 1990, 2008. Each one coincided with significant spikes in oil prices. That is not a coincidence. It is the system, working exactly as it is built. Now here's where Ethan's story connects to something much larger. Ethan's company moves goods. Its profitability depends on fuel costs staying manageable. When energy prices spike, margins get squeezed. When margins get squeezed, companies cut hours, freeze hiring, or reduce investment. That contraction ripples outward. Fewer deliveries means fewer products on shelves. Fewer products means higher prices. Higher prices mean consumers cut spending. When consumers cut spending, businesses cut further. This is not abstract. This is the actual mechanism of economic slowdowns. Energy doesn't just affect the cost of things. It affects whether the economic activity that produces things can exist at all. Here is where it gets even deeper. We are living through the first energy transition in modern history. The world is moving, slowly, unevenly, expensively, from fossil fuels to electricity generated by wind, solar, and other renewables. This transition is real. It is happening. And in many ways, it is necessary. But transitions are not free. The United States and other advanced economies are effectively trying to rebuild the entire energy infrastructure that powers civilization, while keeping that civilization running at the same time. That costs money. Enormous amounts of money. And in the short term, it means higher energy costs for consumers and businesses alike. Texas, where Ethan lives, experienced this directly in February 2021. A severe winter storm overwhelmed the state's power grid. Electricity prices, in the wholesale market, spiked from roughly $30 per megawatt hour to $9,000 per megawatt hour almost overnight. Some Texans received electricity bills for thousands of dollars in a single month. Businesses shut down. Food spoiled. Pipes burst. The economic damage from that single energy disruption was estimated at nearly $200 billion. That is the fragility of energy-dependent economies, laid bare. But Texas is not an exception. It is a preview. Germany, one of the most industrially sophisticated nations on Earth, spent decades building its economy around cheap Russian natural gas. When that supply was cut following Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, German industrial output fell sharply. Factories that had run for generations could no longer afford to operate. The lesson is always the same. Economies that assume energy will remain cheap and plentiful are taking a risk they rarely acknowledge until it's too late. And here is the deeper realization. Most people experience energy crises as a cost of living problem. But what they are actually experiencing is a signal from the physical world. The physical world is telling the economic system that it is demanding more than the energy infrastructure can reliably provide. Inflation, supply shortages, squeezed wages, slowing growth. These are not just economic problems. They are symptoms of an energy system under strain. Ethan's shrinking purchasing power is not only the result of bad monetary policy, it is the result of living in an economy that has been trying to grow faster than its energy foundation can support. Here is the thought that should stay with you. Every economic theory, capitalism, socialism, everything in between, assumes that growth is possible. But growth requires a surplus, and surplus requires energy that costs less to obtain than the value it creates. When that equation holds, economies expand. Standards of living rise. The middle class grows. When that equation tightens, the middle class feels it first. Not because of who runs the government, not because of who runs the banks, but because the physical constraints of energy are the one force that no policy, no technology, and no amount of clever financial engineering can fully override. There is a reason the wealthiest nations on Earth are almost always the ones with the greatest access to reliable, affordable energy. There is a reason that the countries which industrialized first, powered by coal, then oil, dominated the 20th century. There is a reason that energy security is considered a matter of national survival, not just economic policy. Because behind every great economy is not a great financial system. There is a great energy system. Ethan will probably never frame his financial stress in these terms. Most people don't. He'll keep working. He'll keep tracking his budget. He'll wonder why his savings feel smaller every year, even when he does everything right. And the answer, the real answer, won't be found in his spending habits. It will be found in the price of diesel, in the cost of electricity, in the quiet, invisible tax that energy imposes on everything. But the next time you feel like you're working harder and falling further behind, ask yourself a different question. Not, what did I do wrong? But, what is the energy cost of everything I rely on? And is the system that provides it becoming more expensive to maintain? Because if it is, and in most cases it is, then the struggle isn't personal, it's structural. And understanding that is the beginning of understanding how the economy actually works.